May 19th. I don't have anything funny to say about this one. The Spurs defeat the Clippers 96-86, but really they came back from 24 down and won by 10 somehow. That's the key stat right there. Andrew Hahn here. It's ClipperBlog Live with our guest from Oceanside, DJ Foster, and wearing prescription sunglasses because he can't watch bad basketball. Swaggy J, Jordanheimer.
Yeah.
Jordan, let's start with you. What did you notice from this game with your shades on?
I didn't watch the game with the shades on. I put the shades on after the game to remind myself I live in Southern California. It's sunny 300 days a year. I'm going to a barbecue later, Twilight barbecues. It's a good life. That was one of the most upsetting basketball games I've ever watched in my life. Obviously, the Clippers, after a huge early start, lose the game on a 24-0 run in the third quarter. And while I'm usually a guy on coaching and on Vinny Del Negro specifically, who is quick to say the truth lies somewhere in between, I have never watched a coach stand by and watch a season die the way Vinny Del Negro did during the second half of this game. 24-0. He took one timeout. I believe he made one or two substitutions, and one of those was Mo Williams for Randy Foye, and then Randy Foye back for Mo Williams. 10 minutes. We didn't see any Bledsoe. We didn't see any of Nick Young, who has shown a real ability in this series to not play like a knucklehead and actually have a good nose for when his style of creating his own shot is appropriate. It was... I still can't find the right word for what it was. I was standing in front of my television screaming. It only got worse as the fourth quarter went on. Letting Popovich hack a Reggie for 8 free throws in the final 2 minutes, under 4 minutes, and hearing Jeff Van Gundy say, well, you might not want to waste the timeout to pull Reggie Evans out. Might not want to waste the timeout. There's 4 minutes left in the season. You have a guy in who cannot make free throws, and you are burning 30 seconds of possession on him missing 2 free throws. It was abhorrent. It was terrible. I think it might cost Vinny Del Negro his job. And what a shame to have such a promising start get so eaten up by, I think, a collapse that has many factors, but one of which was just a complete mismanagement by Vinny Del Negro.
Yeah, the thing I thought was most comical about that whole Hacker Reggie tactic was that Vinny Del Negro left Reggie in to take all of those fouls. And, of course, everyone knows that once the game gets under 2 minutes, those fouls just become side out of bounds. And that at about 2 minutes is when he decided, oh, they're hacking Reggie, so we should put Bobby Simmons in at the 2-minute mark, when it's completely useless to do something like that. And he had to subsequently pull Bobby Simmons back from the scorer's table so I don't even know if he realized it, if someone had told him that. The other crazy thing that I want to mention, you said that Nick Young saw no time in the third quarter when the Spurs were going on that insane run. There was a stat that I think that said through the first half of Game 3, Nick Young was 16 for 22 from 3. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about that.
Right. Double down on the irony of his post-third quarter interview quotes where he's saying, we just couldn't score the baskets. Just couldn't score in the third quarter, as if he had no control over that. There were no substitutions I could have made that would have changed that. He reminded me of, if you live in Los Angeles, we have famous streets like Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset, but actually in the center of them, they are very ugly places with very scary people. And sometimes you'll see tourists wandering around at like Hollywood and Vine, and they've clearly come here because they know it's a famous intersection, and now they're being accosted by people in grungy Peter Pan costumes. They're confused and scared. That's what Vinny Del Negro looked like during that run to me. That was so troubling. That's when I knew we were losing.
DJ, you want to jump in on any?
Yeah, I mean, Jordan covered it really well, but gosh, what good are, man, those saved timeouts really bailed us out down 12 with 40 seconds left to play, right? Your team, it's crazy too, because if Vinny has one strength as a game manager, I think he calls good timeouts. Like every time I find myself saying timeout during the game, Vinny calls one, and I'm like, okay, that was a well-timed decision there. And for him to completely collapse like this in Game 3 and in a winnable game, by basically not using his timeouts and making the right substitutions, or just breaking up the run, it's kind of crazy. He shot himself in the foot. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, it's exacerbated by the fact that Popovich is sitting on the opposing bench, and the Clippers, I think Chris Paul makes 2 successive buckets. They get 1 stop and they go on a 4-0 run, and Popovich calls a timeout immediately. A 4-0-1 is not acceptable. And on the other side, the Clippers have Vinny Del Negro that wanted to save the 2 timeouts for I don't know, to get a hot dog in the last 40 seconds. I'm not sure what he was doing with both of those. Jordan, do you want to hit on some other stuff?
Do I want to hit on some other stuff?
Loaded question.
Look, I don't know. Where do you want to go with this? Do you want to go with the lineups they had during the collapse? Do you want to hit on some of the things they did right during that? You know, obviously we had this. I'm sorry I keep using the royal we, but the Clippers had this amazing first quarter. It's been totally forgotten now. You know, I spent the entire first half jotting down notes about what I was going to say the Clippers were doing well. Obviously, totally lost in this. I don't know, TJ, where do you want to go with this?
No Bledsoe? How about that? We've had the best player in the playoffs for the Clippers. Best overall player, I think you can say, at this point. Barely plays, it felt like, in favor of Mo Williams, who, hit a couple shots, but what else is he given for it? What, are we just looking too much, hyping Bledsoe too much, or was it legit that he should have been out there?
Yeah, and add into that, not only was he out in favor of, Mo Williams and Randy Foye types, you could even argue he was out in favor of a really ineffective Chris Paul in the second half.
Yeah.
Who, after a first half that was kind of not great, but at least it was classic Chris Paul. It was kind of efficient, sparing from the field, getting other guys involved. I think he had 7 or 8 assists in the first half. But in the second half, San Antonio started throwing a harder trap at him. And once again, he was kind of having trouble. He was losing his dribble, and with all that going on, Eric Bledsoe still gets, 5, 6, 7 minutes in the second half.
Yeah, Andrew just put up a stat: 13 minutes total before the game was really out of hand and out of reach in the last 3 minutes. So 13 minutes of game time when it mattered. Gosh, that's rough.
It's so crazy that it's inexplicable, right? I feel like one of the reasons we're struggling to say anything about it is you can't even do the usual analytic thing and say, well, look, here's obviously the argument for it. Mo Williams gives you X. It's so clear, and it's been so proven in the last 4 games of the playoffs that Eric Bledsoe is the best Clipper. That he's the best chance they have, and it does feel to me like, he made a couple out of control, over quick Bledsoe plays in the first half. And I know I'm just psychoanalyzing, but it feels to me like that's all it takes for Vinny Del Negro to crazily decide not to trust him again. There was a game in Memphis where he had a tech and he never played again. And it's like, seriously, is this what's going on? One bad play and it's like, yep, that's right. It was all a dream. Bledsoe's ineffective.
I felt like it was like Vinny's line of thinking is so simple. Like, hey, we can't make shots. We need someone who is a shooter. Like, that's the only remedy. The shots aren't falling. We better put in the best shooter. Like, no, you put in a guy who can create buckets with his defense and get steals and hit offensive rebounds and make cuts and do all these valuable things we've seen. But no, it's the shots aren't falling. Better stay with Randy Foye. He can shoot. Like,
and by the way, the shots aren't falling, but on the other hand, you are giving them maybe the easiest run of baskets I've ever seen in a crucial quarter of a playoff game. I mean, during that 24-0 run, God, I hate to blame everything on Blake Griffin, but he is so useless at even putting up a hand or being within 3 steps of a weak side shooter in the corner. I mean, he cheats all the way in he's fully in the paint. So basically there's nobody between a Kawhi Leonard standing at the 3-point line and Blake with a foot in the paint. I mean, obviously he's going to make that shot. That's not like a question.
Yeah.
Do they not believe they'll keep making these shots? Their entire offense is predicated around that shot. You have to at least find a way to cheat towards him. I don't know.
DJ, out of curiosity, what score did you give Blake on the ledger today? Because he was passable on defense in the first half, but
Yeah.
that energy just wasn't there in the second.
I gave him an A, actually, just because I felt offensively he was the only guy doing really anything. And that first quarter, it was all him, right? He was like 7 for 9. We beat up Blake for his defense, but he played about as well as he can play in that first half, right? He attacked, single coverage. He made some tough follow-away shots. Like, he moved away from double teams. Like, he was great. He was great in that first half. So I gave him an A, and I don't want to put this on him because I felt like he didn't have the help offensively that he needed.
And Jordan, how did you feel about DeAndre Jordan today? I thought his first half was pretty solid, and he just kind of disappeared in the second half as well.
Yeah, and look, by the way, DJ's totally right. Blake does deserve, he was one of the better, if not the best Clipper out there today. I'm obviously in kind of a ranty mood. Yeah, look, Andrew, I think you just said it. DJ came out like the first quarter of the first game, played a really energetic first quarter. And you can always tell when DJ's playing a good game because he's around the offensive glass for those tip-ins, whereas somehow he seems to really kind of disappear during his bad games in terms of how aggressive he is on the offensive boards. But again, a big problem with the third and fourth quarter is they never had any rhythm in any lineup. So yeah, DJ was ineffective, but everyone is ineffective. There was never one moment in the second half, I felt, that all of a sudden, offensively or defensively, Vinny managed to find a unit that was gelling, that kind of trusted each other and knew kind of how they were going to play as a unit. It was just completely lacking, in totality. So yeah, DJ was ineffective in the second, but so was everybody in kind of a similar way.
Right. Let's focus on the positives for this game, and the Clippers just did a really good job packaging all of it into the first quarter, making it very convenient for us to focus on the positives. First quarter only. That's pretty much the only positive to this game, right, DJ?
The first quarter, I want to talk about it because I felt like it was unsustainable, even as it was happening. Not so much offensively, even though you could definitely make the argument that Blake Griffin wasn't going to be able to keep that up through 48 minutes of play. But really defensively. Yeah, they were stuck on 9 points forever, but they were missing layups. Tony Parker was missing layups. Their drives, they just weren't finishing. They had open shots on the perimeter that they were just missing. It's not like the Clippers were totally, stymieing everything that the Spurs had. They weren't blowing up their sets, and the Spurs were getting good shots and good looks. So you had to figure at some point it was going to regress to the mean and that they were going to start hitting these shots. And when you let Kawhi Leonard have wide open looks, or Caron Butler just matadors him to the rim, eventually they're going to get buckets out of that, right? And I think that's what we saw was a regression to the mean in the second and third quarter for both sides. The Clippers' offense stagnated, and Blake Griffin missed some easy shots, and Chris Paul missed some easy looks, and the Spurs just kept rolling. They never got away from their system. They never tried to, one guy taking on 5. They just kept doing what they did, and I think what we saw is that the Spurs are a better team, and that the regression to the mean kind of caught up with the Clippers.
Yeah, I guess we're talking first quarter. One thing that I found myself thinking, which after this game seems almost peripheral now, is, but real tip of the hat to Nick Young. I know we've talked a lot about the redemption of Nick Young during the playoffs, but not only has he turned out to be kind of this like goofily likable guy, but it turns out he's maybe not such a knucklehead of a basketball player. I find myself thinking that more and more he's really starting to understand the difference between when his skills as a shot creator are useful and when there's a better opportunity out there. And that's exactly what he was always accused of not being able to do. But you really saw a lot in the first half. And when Nick Young's on the court now, he knows how to swing the ball one more time to an open passer or open guy. He had a few hockey assists. On the other hand, he still does have a good nose for 5 seconds on the shot clock. I'm one of the few guys on this team who can create a shot when it needs to be created. And I kind of went into the playoffs feeling the Clippers might make a bid to re-sign either Foy or Nick Young. And I think I said on a CBL I'd prefer they re-sign Foy, and I really flipped on that. I'm starting to think that Nick Young, given another full season, maybe even a better coaching staff, could be a really valuable part of a good team.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you before you got to it. So out of those guys, even you can throw Chauncey in there too. You'd rather have Nick Young back, and what kind of price do you think he's played himself into? Because he's had a pretty good playoffs.
I would definitely want him back over Foy or Chauncey. Look, I love what Chauncey gave you, and in fact, I have been thinking a lot during this series that Chauncey might have made a big difference in this particular series. His ability to get to the line, his ability to hit those big shots, but he's going to be a 36, 37-year-old guy coming off a really serious injury. I'd love to see him back as an assistant coach, but Nick Young is really coming into his prime. Analytics guys always talk about 27, 28 as being your prime. I think Nick Young is 26 years old. Yeah. I think this could be a guy that if you give him the mid-level exemption, whatever that is, DJ, maybe $5, $6 million?
$5 million.
$5 million. I don't know if that gets him. If that does, I think maybe you may have a bargain with a look. We can look back at this and laugh a year from now if he turns into the next Al Thornton, who just becomes hated by fans for jacking up shots. But I would totally do that right now.
Yeah, it's crazy how far he's come. I mean, the Clippers acquired him for Brian Cook, and now he may have played his way into a mid-level deal. Like that's kind of shows you how good he's been in the playoffs. Andrew, I got a question for you. As far as Nick Young goes, related to that, would you rather? I forgot, so I had to talk my way through it. Now I got it though. Shut up. This is why you're the host and I'm the analyst. Would you rather have him over Caron Butler at this point?
Would I rather have Nick Young
going forward? But contracts aside, just player on player, would you rather have Nick Young than Caron Butler?
That's like a apples and oranges question to me because I see Caron Butler as a small forward and I see Nick Young as a shooting guard. But masquerading Nick Young as a small forward is kind of laughable to me. Like maybe he can do it in 3 or 4 minute stretches, but I wouldn't want to construct a team where Nick Young is my starting small forward.
Well, right. But do you want to construct a team with Caron Butler as your starting small forward?
Well, there isn't much of a choice at this point, right? Caron Butler is going to be the starting small forward for the next year or two. Nick Young, I've warmed up to. I think everyone on ClipperBlog was not enthusiastic about Nick Young being the answer for shooting guard.
Yeah, I wasn't.
When the trade deadline was approaching. And he has shown a lot more than his reputation had suggested in Washington. The one trait that I'm not that keen about, and this is the trait that all of the Clipper wings have, and by the wings I'm referring to Mo, Foy, Butler, and Young. They have the quickest heat check I have ever seen in my life. If they make 2 shots in succession or 2 shots in 4 minutes, that third shot is just gonna be, they're just gonna pop it right there and just check to see if they have it or not. And if they don't, then they'll go back and they'll play within the system again. And if they make another shot or 2, you're gonna see another crazy heat check just go up there. So that's my one big issue.
I should probably save this for some kind of ClipperBlog live season wrap-up episode, but I'm sure we can always repeat these things. But it's funny, Andrew, what you just said made me think about something that I was just thinking during the game, which is I don't want to be the guy who's like, oh, they've got to get rid of Vinny. But I think an argument for bringing in a great coaching staff and not worrying so much about will the star players love, say, a Stan Van Gundy, is that this team, as DJ said, is going forward with Caron Butler as their small forward and DJ as their center, and they're pretty much locked in contractually to those things. Player development may be their most likely way forward. They don't have draft picks. They're not going to be able to bring in a big free agent. If you can't point to a coaching staff that's going to bring a system that restrains guys from heat checking every 3 shots. You don't see the Spurs doing that, or gets DJ to understand how he can be a 36-minute-a-night guy. I don't see what you're offering fans as a reason to think this team's going to get that much better next year.
Right, and I think that's the big argument with Vinny is that the young, talented guys really haven't progressed as much as they probably should have. Blake Griffin is doing a lot of the same things he was doing his rookie year, except defensively, I think he's a worse player this year than he was his rookie year. Any of the other young guys, I guess we're low on them now, but Trey Tompkins doesn't even see the floor at all, right? I guess you can give Vinny some credit for Bledsoe if you're going to knock him for those other guys, but play the man. If he's doing this, put him in the game. Like, that's if you want to take credit for developing him, put him in the game over Randy Foye and Mo Williams.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Just I'm with you.
No, but you're right, and even Trey Tompkins, who I forgot about. It's like sometimes it feels, because of the way the team is coached, like this team has no upside. But then I remind myself that there is upside, but it involves developing guys like DeAndre Jordan, Bledsoe, Trey Tompkins, who could be a stretch four, which is such a valuable thing in this league, and Nick Young, and that's got to be a part of the strategies.
All right, fellas. Charlie, who was supposed to be our man on the ground, is having technical issues with his computer, so I am now phoning.
I know it.
I know
what really happened. Before we get to Charlie, they wanted him to help with the Staples Center turnaround. And Charlie's like a big, muscular guy,
Hello?
so.
Charlie.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Charlie.
Hey.
Why don't you give us your quick takes from the game before we devolve back into whatever it is we were talking about?
Okay, yeah, I mean, we just got back from the press conferences where Parker and Duncan and Blake all spoke, and it was really interesting. I mean, both Duncan and Parker talked about how they knew that the Clippers were going to come out on a run, as if it were, and like obviously completely deadpan. They all spoke about how that was going to be what they were going to do, and then they were going to have to, kind of set the tone for Kawhi and Danny Green and those types to just weather the storm. And then, they talked about whittling it down in the second quarter, and then they just, as has happened every single game this series, they came out in the third quarter and, they just out-executed. They spread the floor, and we can talk about this in a second and how Vinny and the Clippers choose to defend it. But, Blake talked about how, they're just so good at spreading the floor. Someone asked what Blake has learned from the Spurs and from Duncan. And it's just how he said how they're prepared for every defense. They've seen every defense, and they just, they're so efficient, he said, and they move the ball so well, and, that's what happened.
Did Vinny mention at all why he left Bledsoe and Young out of the game in that second half for so long?
You know what? He didn't, and I was surprised, but you realize that at this point, down 3-0 in this series, after a game like today, that's not the point. It just is so much bigger than that. We know that we think that when a team is going on a 24-0 run, you should probably think about playing your best defensive player. But it's just not about that anymore,
What is it about,
Charlie?
Yeah.
Thanks, DJ.
It's a little of both, guys.
What's it about, Charlie?
Just a little of both. Vinny Del Negro story.
That should be his story. So was this as bad as we're making it out to be? Because we're saying, and a lot of people on Twitter are asking Andrew as well, is this the game that gets Vinny Del Negro fired? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think we all probably agree. The people who are in charge of firing him probably know what he is by this point. I still think it's going to come down to, whether it's Donald Sterling or Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, a small group of people are going to decide on his fate. Kevin asked Blake if this felt as bad as Memphis felt good. And Blake said, yeah, that's kind of a good way to put it. And, being here, obviously you get caught up in the run, but it's the Spurs. So that run isn't just going to keep going. The Spurs aren't going to get blown off the floor. and you just watch Vinny just standing there on the sideline, not knowing. He has no answer.
Okay, there's a Twitter question here from JP Johnson saying, do you think the injuries that the Clippers sustained in the first round doomed them for the second round? And piggybacking on that a little bit, I know that DJ in the past series said that some of these losses, it's on the players. I mean, yes, maybe Vinny's not the best X's and O's guys, but the effort has to be there, the desire has to be there, and they just didn't show up for some of those games. Charlie, do you think that this loss is majority on Vinny Del Negro, or are you still assigning some of that blame to the players or injuries?
I wouldn't. Well, no. First of all, the injury question, obviously, it has something to do with it. I mean, Greg Popovich said. I mean, I have the quote right here. He said, hold on, give me 1 sec. Yeah, he said, and Greg Popovich, who doesn't say anything, by the way, he said, I don't think Chris Paul's 100%. I look at him, I know that kid, I know how he can play. You don't get Greg Popovich to say that unless, it's almost like he feels bad. Like he knows that they, obviously, he probably feels perfectly confident they would have won the series, but he knows that they dodged a bullet because Chris Paul's not right. And Blake referenced Chris Paul not being right, and Blake's not right. And Vinny has mentioned a lot that Blake's injury tends to get worse over the course of a game, and I wasn't sure if that was really a medical diagnosis or just kind of an observation. And talking to a bunch of people around here, it seems like that's the medical diagnosis, which I guess makes sense now that we've seen 3 games of it. And there was another part of that question that I rambled over.
Yeah, the other part of the question is, who's getting the majority of the blame for this loss? Is this?
Oh, right. And I would say on an in-game management, it may be players, but just in general, I mean, we can't hear enough about a system that the Spurs run, and it is built to weather, adversity, and the Clippers do not have that system. That system is named Chris Paul, and there is not any one player. Michael Jordan might have been the best player of all time, but he ran a triangle offensive system that was very clear. The Clippers have nothing of that nature. They have no system whatsoever. It's, as we saw in the third quarter, when the Spurs went on their run, it was all system for them and all isolation for the Clippers. I mean, it was black and white like that.
Right. I mean, it was really stunning, Charlie. Obviously, we've talked all season about, the offense is Chris Paul. But was I the only one who thought I was using hyperbole? I thought it was,
no.
Well, when Chris Paul's in, they let the offense speak all Chris Paul. But it's like pop quiz. You're on a 12-0 run the wrong way. You call a timeout. You get to call your best play, the play that will get you points. What do you call? Nothing. That's the answer.
And, I mean, guys, I hate to be kind of like, I told you so, but throughout the whole course of the year when Chris would have those games where – not that and I didn't tell anyone, so I should have. When Chris would have those games where he would just take over, part of me wouldn't get that excited because we always talk about what's sustainable and what's not. That is not sustainable. One player doing everything. And so while it was amazing to see, those were regular season games that frankly didn't matter. And you see what happens against a team that is a good team. And it doesn't help that Chris is injured, but it doesn't make a 3-0 deficit a Clippers advantage if Chris Paul's healthy.
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit in my recap after last loss, mixed in between some weird personal relationship anecdotes.
Yeah.
But
we're here for you, DJ, anytime.
Yeah, no, I know. With Paul, it's like they made this formula, right? And we saw it again. Like they rode Blake early, and Blake was magnificent. Yep. And they got a big lead, and then they blew it like they usually do. And then when it came time to depend on Paul, they kind of turned it over to him and said, "Hey, hope this works." And Pop is smart enough that even though he acknowledges Paul isn't himself and he wasn't shooting well, he takes the game out of his hands and puts it in the hands of Reggie Evans. And what does Del Negro counter with? Nothing. He leaves the game in Reggie Evans' hands. I mean,
literally, guys, neither of you. Oh, DJ, you watched it on TV, but you know what? Jeff Van Gundy's so polite. He won't say this. He'll go. This is a real significant decision for Vinny Del Negro. He'll say, "Oh, it's a real significant decision to decide whether to take a timeout here." And it's like, oh man, he's just doing everything with saying, yeah, it's a significant decision to not take
He's
a timeout.
winging it.
That is significantly crazy. But he's so diplomatic.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? To be honest, I think we're almost being too kind in saying that the system is Chris Paul, because at least there could be some sort of rationale for designing a system around a player that great. The system is whoever has the ball. It's not even Chris Paul. It's just that he happens to have the ball most. If Eric Bledsoe's the point guard, the system is Eric Bledsoe. You know, it's not. It's just not a sustainable thing, and we've seen it. And you're right, DJ. It does kind of, maybe this is it. Maybe this, you know. And what was interesting was in the press conference, Vinny kept talking about how it was a process and how they're building something, and how, you know, they'll continue to put pieces around Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. And it, you know, anyone who has a clue is thinking, well, what role are you going to have in this, Vinny? And how obviously are you trying to deflect what the roster construction is from what the performance on the court of your team is?
Oh, and look, there he is, making his debut on the new format ClipperBlog Live, Jovan Bua. Jovan, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's doing a lot better in the first half.
All right, I'm gonna make one comment about Vinny here, and then we're gonna see why you're so much more down in the second half. Well, everyone else knows why you're down, but you
Yeah, I have a guess.
Yeah.
Back to what Charlie was saying about the Clippers not really having any kind of system. And this is the reason why, more than anything, I wouldn't advocate Vinny coming back. And there's a laundry list of reasons why people would not want Vinny Del Negro back. I don't trust Vinny to properly develop DeAndre Jordan and Eric Bledsoe. And you see flashes of really great things from both of those guys. But he's had 2 years with both of them now, and DeAndre's nowhere near where you want him to be at this point. And I really worry about putting the Clippers have already put $43 million into DeAndre. They're probably going to have to re-sign Eric Bledsoe to a decent number because clearly he's a talent. And the whole beat on Vinny Del Negro coming out of Chicago is, well, he developed young talent. That's what he does. He's a motivator and he develops young talent. And I don't really see him developing the young talent, especially if everyone is right. And we've seen it this year that he really relies on the veterans. He doesn't want to try and nurture those younger players. Charlie said it previously on ClipperBlog Live. Maybe Eric Bledsoe wouldn't be as gassed in these playoffs if he had more time to sow his oats in the regular season.
Yeah,
Right.
Andrew, oh yeah, can I just quickly point out something? I think you hit it on the head. I think that's way more important than X's and O's in game. I think all you have to do is look at Oklahoma City and find a coach that is not a tactician, but he develops players. And that's way more important. If DeAndre Jordan and Eric Bledsoe refine their game or are worked into it, you know, just have more cohesion, it doesn't matter what you do during the game because all you have to do is put them on the court because they're better players at that point.
Charlie, you literally took the point out of my mouth. I was going to point to this. I was going to say the Spurs and the Thunder. Look at these teams, and for all Pop's kind of image as the stodgy guy, look at the minutes he gets out of rookies and out of players that he has developed into a new thing that they have to be. You can't tell me that, say, Trey Tompkins couldn't have given you some useful minutes in this series. If he'd seen the floor since the All-Star break, maybe he could have. Yep. You know, it's just watching these other teams like take what they have and utilize it. And look, I love what Reggie Evans and Kenny Martin have done for us, but sorry again with the royal we, but you can't talk about things that aren't sustainable, like plus minutes from rotations made up of all scraps, basically, none of whom can create their own shot. That's not sustainable. And if you had maybe used some of your other talent better, you'd have different lineups in key situations.
Right.
Jovan, how do you feel about any of this?
You guys talking about Vinny?
Talking about Vinny, talking about developing the young players. You want to talk about the first quarter? What do you want to talk about? It's your first time. Say whatever you want to say.
All right. Well, I'll talk about just something that I said over at, I just did the 48 Minutes of Hell like post-game show. And I just felt that, to me, it almost seemed like it was a very fluke first half. Like, that's what I took away from it, was that I felt like the Clippers were just like making like a lot of the shots and stuff that they were hitting, like they had at times in like game 1 and 2, they just weren't making them. And that on the contrary, like the Spurs were still getting like reasonably good looks. They were just making dumb turnovers. They were missing. I believe Ginobili and Parker missed like 4 or 5 layups in the first half that like they were making all the like 100% of their layups in like game 1 and 2. They were missing threes. So I just kind of felt that like the Clippers got this giant lead, but a lot of it wasn't based off of them actually playing amazing defense, them executing perfectly offensively. It was sort of a byproduct of just they were stopping the Spurs kind of, and then that was like leading to transition points, but it wasn't really, to quote the great Jordan Heimer, it wasn't sustainable. So
I do like the word sustainable.
We've all started using it way too much.
Yeah, so like when the Spurs like got it down to 10 at halftime, I like tweeted, I was like, it's basically like tied. Like a 10-point lead over San Antonio is like being tied with them. Like, and then the third quarter happened, and I was just like the Spurs are just a better team. Like no matter what, like the Clippers played almost a perfect, like as well as they could have played first half. Like Blake Griffin went off. Like Chris Paul didn't look as injured as he looked in game 1 and game 2 at times. And like even in the first quarter, like DeAndre was playing good D on Duncan. He was active on the boards. Like I thought for the most part, other than like Caron Butler, like everyone had a pretty good first half, and like that ended with the Clippers only having a 10-point lead at halftime. It was just like, this is how good the Spurs are. Like you can play as almost perfect basketball and still only have a 10-point lead on them. And it's just because no matter what you do, they're still going to run their sets. They're still going to execute. They're still going to find the open man. And they've just consistently exploited the holes in the Clippers defense. However the Clippers react to one thing, then they counter that with something else. And if the Clippers are going to react to the counter, then the Spurs are going to counter that. And it's just like everyone keeps using the chess checkers cliche analogy, which, I guess you could apply that here. But that really is the brilliance of Greg Popovich, because no matter what you do, no matter what you try and take away from this team, they're going to counter it with something else, because they can go inside, they can run the pick and roll, they can kick it out to their shooters, they have slashers, like they have everything you could possibly want for an offensive team. And that is my rant.
They're a good team. They're definitely a good team.
I think
Vinny. Oh yeah, go.
Sorry, I think looking back at it now in Memphis, we can call the Memphis series the perfect series for Vinny Del Negro, right? Because it's just going out there and motivating, which is his best trait, getting the guys to play hard and just outgrinding a team. That series was never about execution. It was never about offensive system. It was just about who's more physical. And so Vinny won that series as a coach over Lionel Hollins. Against Greg Popovich, you can't just put the best players out on the floor and expect to be okay.
Well, you definitely can't be okay if you don't put the best players out on the floor.
Yeah, that too. It would help if Bledsoe would get some game, but you know what I mean? I think now we can just kind of look at this as Memphis was, like you guys said, and like I fought you on it, but Memphis was the perfect matchup for the Clippers in some way. And the Spurs are the nightmare matchup.
TJ,
I think that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Everyone's talking. I blame Charlie on the phone.
Go.
All right. I have a question and everyone's been saying it all series. They've been saying it even before the series began. The Spurs are the better team. The Spurs are arguably the best team in the NBA right now. Would you feel differently about the Clippers' chances if they came into this series completely healthy? Do you think the Clippers would have won, or would it just have been an extra 1, 2, maybe 3 more games? Charlie, let's start with you.
Well, if it were an extra 1, 2, or 3 more games, that would have been a completely different series. So yeah.
Well, but do you still think the Spurs would have won regardless, even if they were 100%?
I picked the Clippers in 7, not knowing anything about health. I thought it was going to be a long series if they were healthy. I really did. And maybe I had been hypnotized by Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, and I thought I really did. I think it was going to be a different series, but we'll never know. We'll never know.
Yeah, I've long said that for the Clippers to win playoff games, Chris Paul has to be close to perfect. This is just kind of the formula that they've developed throughout the entire season was, waiting for their superhero to kind of bail them out. That being said, like you, Charlie, without notice of health, I said the Spurs in 6 because the Spurs are too smart to let one man beat them or two men beat them. And eventually, just the numbers game, right? The Clippers take turns on offense, the Spurs move the ball, and it's whoever gets the open shot's got it. It's 5 men versus 2 men, and that's just overwhelming odds. So
yeah,
it would have been a different series, yeah, but I still think the Spurs would have taken it.
Well, and by the way, as the person on the record for picking the Clippers in 7, I know it sounds stupid, but I don't think the Spurs in 6 is that drastically different a pick. I think it both suggests there's going to be a lot of games in the series.
Right.
Yeah, I'll echo Charlie in saying that, of course, we would have felt different about this series with those players healthy in terms of the competitiveness of the games. Of course, it would have made a difference. But maybe it's a blessing in disguise that without these guys basically just bringing the miracle of their God-given abilities to the Staples Center every night and just stealing a few games, the warning Charlie Widows and the Widowses of the world have been giving us all season has to be heeded. If these guys had come out and done their thing and won the series or brought it to 6 or 7 games, maybe then it's not as clear that, look, there was no system when there had to be a system. As great as these guys are, they'd be that much better if they're going into this with a plan both for possessions, games, and development of the young talent they have as a whole. And so in that sense, I'm almost glad to have seen how hapless this team is when those guys can't be fully themselves.
I think that makes sense from an evaluation standpoint, definitely.
Jovan, what do you think about this?
I think that, well, I was probably like one of the most pessimistic people like from ClipperBlog because I had Spurs in 5. I thought that the Spurs would win the first 2, Clippers would either win 3 or 4, and then like lose in 5 in San Antonio. I think that if everyone was healthy, I think this would have been a very competitive series. I think it would have been one of those competitive series where like which team's better and they're going to win, but the other team is just so scrappy and talented. And I think the Clippers would have just found a way, like if Chris Paul was 100% healthy, to work their magic to make this a 6 or 7 game series. But with that said, I think that what this did expose is, like you guys have been saying, is like how this really is been like a 2-man team for most of the year. Like I think like the bench has come on as of late, but like realistically, it's like Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, then there's everybody else. Like there's always a 3rd or 4th player that like steps up randomly every game, but I think that we still haven't. I mean, maybe it's Eric Bledsoe, but like I really don't see like who is the 3rd best player on this team at this point. Like Caron Butler has had some really good games, like 20 points, but then he has games like tonight where he doesn't have a field goal, and I didn't think he scored tonight. And then you have Nick Young, was pretty much didn't do much the entire season until the Memphis series, and then tonight he was 4 of 10, 1 for 5 from 3. Mo Williams has been on and off, but I think that's been the team's biggest problem. They need like a 3rd consistent player that's doesn't have to be of the level of Griffin and Paul, but has to be someone above like just your average role player.
So, Jovan, you think everyone on the Clippers roster, aside from Griffin and Paul, they're all role player or below?
I think DeAndre and Bledsoe have potential to be more, at least good starters. But I think like that goes back to what you guys are talking about, like Vinny's development. That I think Bledsoe's gotten a lot better. I don't know how much of that has to do with Vinny, but like you said, like DeAndre his production has been kind of like plateaued and like been stagnant since last season, and I think that like we've been talking about, hey, he could be like a poor man's Tyson Chandler or like as good as Tyson Chandler, sometime in the future. And I think that this season he hasn't shown that. Like, and I think Eric Bledsoe, we all know, could be, one of the best already is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. But like his offense is starting to take off. Like he has the potential to be a really good starting point guard. So So I think like those two are the. But it also comes down to like youth, because this team, like Caron Butler's already past his prime. Nick Young's like in his prime, but like what does that mean? Randy Foy, like how much better are these guys gonna get? Like, so I think it's a matter of like this team is either like really young or really old, and they need to get rid of the really old guys.
Okay, going back to this series for a second, just moving away from the Clippers roster in general. The Clippers have it's a very real prospect that they're going to get swept come tomorrow. Does a second round sweep by the eventual NBA champions, potential eventual NBA champions, is that the same thing as losing the 7th game in Memphis? In your mind, would getting swept? They've been pretty bad losses, all 3 of them so far. Tomorrow could be just as bad. If they are convincingly beaten in the second round, would you say that that's about the level as if they had that really tough Game 7 in Memphis and they lost by 1 or 2, a game that people didn't really expect them to beat, or do you think that they end up overachieving? Charlie?
This, I would say, is almost exactly what I would have told you the Clippers season would have turned out to be when they made the trade. I thought they'd probably win a series and then lose to a better team. It's tough to really. I think there's definitely a post I've been working on for a long time about how this team did in relation to the expectations, and I think the answer to that is, what were the expectations? For me, this was a flawed team with some great players, and usually that gets you into the playoffs, and you can mess around and win some games in a good matchup, and then you look like this.
Kevin and Jordan have said a lot on the Clippers podcast, and I think it's very true. They set a baseline with that first round win, right, against Memphis, and I thought we learned some things. I thought they showed how resilient they are, and they showed that they're a tough team, and they went to the grindhouse and they lost a leg and they lost a hip, and and now they're in the slaughterhouse with the Spurs, and they're just handling their business. But I think ultimately the Memphis series taught us some things, and now the Clippers can learn how that next step, right? And it's like I said, to learn how to dump someone, you have to be dumped at some point. And I think that's what this series is all about. The Clippers can just learn how a team does it over 4 games, regardless of who's hot and who's not. It's an offensive system. It's a defensive system. It's not on the backs of one guy. It's a system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, DJ, I don't know if I can really add anything. I agree with all of that. To me, there's 2 ways of looking at it. Charlie's looking at it in a very realpolitik way of just what was the talent, what were the expectations. If they had lost Game 7, as a consumer of popular sports media, I would have had to read an entire season of it was the Clippers again with 3-1. There would be stuff about questioning their heart and their toughness. And even though I understand that in some ways that stuff doesn't really change anything, having seen that, I think it's nice that there has been created this baseline of question their strategies, question their roster or their talent, but don't question that they have an ability to win a series, to win a tough series. So like DJ said, go into Memphis and do something that people doubted they could do. I do think that was important, and so I do feel like it changes what the lesson of the season was, so to speak.
Yeah, the quick follow before you go. The focus is on the right things now, right?
Exactly.
It's on the things that they can fix. It's not getting tougher and being less like the Clippers of the past. It's, hey, the Clippers have this, and now they just need to go the extra step and get a strategist and get someone who, calls a timeout and pulls Reggie Evans out of the game on Hacker Reggie and makes changes during a 24-0 run. Like, these are the problems now. We have that set. I think that's very important. That Game 7 in Memphis is going to be critical for this franchise for so many reasons in my mind.
DJ, do you think the players are learning anything from this, or do you think it's more the organization as a whole?
I think the players are learning something. I think ultimately the head coach of this team, if Chris Paul and Blake Griffin go to Donald Sterling and say, we love Vinny, keep Vinny, we can win with Vinny, Donald Sterling is going to keep Vinny, right? That's his main focus. And I think this ultimately comes down to Sterling. I know O'Shea has a lot of pull in the organization. I know there's going to be some coaches out there that he likes, but this is up to Sterling. Ultimately, he's the guy that makes the calls. And we all know he likes Vinny because he's political or presidential or whatever the hell he said. If Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, I don't think they vouch for Vinny anymore because I think they see that they need more than what Vinny is capable of giving them after this. So I think when Sterling, if he goes to those guys, I don't think it's a ringing endorsement.
And by the way, DJ, O'Shea also working without a contract. I know we all assume that, of course, O'Shea will be back. I think assume is a little strong.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick follow-up to DJ. I agree. I think if anyone's going to learn anything, it is the players. I don't trust the organization or the coach to take away anything valuable from anything we've seen. I think you guys are both right that the way that the Memphis series unfolded was important in whatever we took away from it. But I think in terms of the organization or the structure, it's the players who individually and maybe collectively, but those are the ones that will be able to benefit from it.
Okay, we're running awfully long right now, so let's wind this down with final thoughts. Jovan, quick turnaround, I think, 30 hours before Game 4? Any adjustments, anything? Have you already resigned yourself that this is done? I can see Jordan's putting his sunglasses back
on. I think that they just need to look at the, I guess, first, film from the first half and try and, recreate the energy and the magic that they had in that first half and look at what worked and what didn't. And then I don't think you throw away the second half film, but you just kind of have to look at it and be like, well, here's why we didn't score for 8.5 straight minutes. And just kind of try and figure out, what was working, what wasn't, who was taking shots that they shouldn't be, et cetera, et cetera. If I had to say, I assume I will just be a pessimist and say that the Spurs win tomorrow, but I think it'll be closer. It'll actually be hopefully down to the wire, not like Clippers are down 10-15 trying to make up for it with 2 or 3 minutes left. But I'll be at the game as a fan, so I'll be cheering for the Clippers, but hopefully they give me something to cheer about.
I think more than almost any other situation in sports, being up or down 3-0 is mental. A team either comes out and fights down 3-0 or they don't. And I think the Clippers are done. And I'm left with 2 images from the ABC broadcast to support a completely subjective theory. One was Greg Popovich, legs sprawled out in front of him, chilling with Tony Parker during halftime and laughing. They're down 10. They've given up a 25-point deficit in the first, and they're just chuckling. And the contrasting image to that is the last timeout Vinny called. Those timeouts he'd been saving. That's why I didn't pull Reggie out. He called a timeout with 37 seconds left, down 10, and no one was even in the huddle. Reggie Evans was looking at him. Mo Williams was looking at him. Chris Paul wasn't in the shot. Blake Griffin wasn't in the shot. He was a man speaking to nobody. Clippers lose tomorrow.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said. I'm on board with that. If from what I want to see, from a fan's perspective, at least, I don't care really if they win or lose. This series is done. What I want to see is lots of Eric Bledsoe, lots of DeAndre Jordan, for better or worse. Or hey, maybe look at the analytics and see what lineups have been the best and play those lineups. Let's see if we're just full of it. You know what I mean? The numbers lie. If they suck, I'm gonna play the exact best lineups, and we're still gonna lose. I want Vinny to stick it to all of us. I don't know. I just want to see him throw some stuff on the wall. Just get crazy. It's 3-0. What do you got to lose at this point, right?
Charlie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we'll have a lot of time to talk about big picture stuff in the off season, which I think will come probably tomorrow evening. But just in general about this series, the way it's gone, the way Vinny spoke in the press conference after was just so defeatist, just in terms of how to stop the Spurs and basically how you can't. He said If you go get out on the shooters, then you open things up for Tim Duncan in the middle, and then if you go there, then you open things up for Manu and Tony Parker driving. And to me, like, it's not inevitable that they get good looks. Obviously, they're a wonderful offensive team. They're maybe the best offensive team, but you can stop it by stopping penetration. You can stop it by blowing up pick and rolls, like the basic things that start an offense. You don't have to let happen to you. It doesn't compute when the coach is saying that it's inevitable that they're going to get torched. I mean, that's just not ever the case, and especially not in the second round of the playoffs, because there's a reason why both teams are there. Obviously I'll leave it on. I think it would have been cool to see a series where the Clippers were healthy, but it exposed what they can't do, I think, as an organization.
Yeah, it is interesting because when you watch the Spurs run their system either on offense or defense, they're looking for particular things. If the Clippers want to take those long two-pointers and make 90% of them on just some freak day, then the Spurs will live with that and say, well, we want to protect the paint, we want to protect those corner threes, and you can have whatever else you want. Whereas it seems kind of like the Clippers strategy is, we're going to shut everything down. Like everything. You want to get the three-point shot, we're going to shut that down.
Right.
You want to penetrate, we're going to shut that down. You want to...
Or because we can't shut it all down, we can't shut any of it down.
Right. They're trying to do so much that they can't do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, that's what he talked about in the press conference.
They're everywhere, these guys.
So, ClipperBlog viewers, you've heard it here. A bunch of risk takers. They're all saying that the Spurs are better and they're probably going to win. You can take that to Vegas, apparently. So, for Yovan Bua, Jordan Heimer, DJ Foster, Charlie Widows, I'm Andrew Hahn. Thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.